Today, we're going to talk about frames. A quick episode today, but don't let that fool you, it's still important. In fact, frames are a powerhouse of composition and a personal favorite. I think they're simple to implement, and it's a good trick to make your images more interesting and more thoughtful. I must admit that sometimes when I'm lost in a scene and unsure on how to approach it, I find myself recurring to this element quite often. Is that cheating? Maybe. Maybe it's not. But it's definitely an easy way out. Maybe you've heard of the concept a frame within a frame. If you haven't, no worries, that's why we're here. It's as straightforward as it sounds. We are creating a frame within the frame of our camera to highlight a subject. Frames are wonderful to direct our eyes to a specific subject or a scene, but there is much more to them than just that. For example, one of the most important things frames do is that they give our subject importance. They heighten our subject's presence. Emotionally tight frames can create a feeling of closeness or intimacy, or they could create a sense of confinement and anxiety. And larger frames that offer more space around the subject can communicate freedom or isolation. By choosing how we frame these moments, we have the power to control how the viewer feels about the subject. Frames also create depth, much like lines do, because many times these frames stand in the foreground and help us create different layers in our composition. Layers are good because they let us travel through or into the image. In this example, our eyes travel through this car and directly to the family, which is our main focus. And the use of framing isn't only about composition, but it's also telling a narrative. By using the car as a frame, we are adding to the story. It reveals how this family got here, and we know that it's a family road trip vacation. Frames can also be used to remove unnecessary distractions from our image, to add texture and context, as we have just seen in the previous example, but I think it's best if we take a look at some more examples. This image is pretty straightforward. If you're struggling to spot the frame in this one, well, I don't know what to say. Persistence is key, I guess. But if you did spot it, congratulations. Let's move on. Welcome to Pontevedra, my grandfather's town in the northwest coast of Spain, and a region that can be quite rainy and gray. I captured this scene through a big letter P from one of those increasingly popular city signs. This one, to be exact. They're not exactly my cup of tea, if I'm honest. It's as if one city thought it was a good idea and suddenly everyone wants to do the same. In Spain, we say, culo veo, culo quiero. The direct translation being, as I see, as I want. So basically, monkey see, monkey do. But I guess we are a bit naughty in Spain. 75% of the time I know where I am, thank you, no need to remind me. Anyway, back to photography. In this case, this sign was of good use, acting as a frame for my subject and also an interesting way to add color to a monotone scene, making it more aesthetically appealing. Have you ever been to Toledo? Toledo, Spain, of course, not Toledo, Ohio. If you haven't, it's worth a visit. A very important city during the medieval period, known as La Ciudad de las Tres Culturas, since it was a place where Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived together, which was quite rare at the time. The city today maintains its medieval character. This is La Catedral de Toledo, yes, this tiny bit over here. The view of the city from this location is fantastic, and it would make a good photo regardless. But as photographers, we need to see things a little different. I use these plans to frame our subject, but I'm also revealing my surroundings. I'm adding context and texture. In a sense, I'm sort of creating a scene. Before we continue, let me take you on a brief detour all the way back to the mid-1900s, let's say the 1950s and 60s. Let me introduce you to one of photography's greatest, Julius Shulman, a master of architecture photography. If you're interested in this kind of photography, you should check him out. If you're not, give it a try anyway, you might surprise yourself. I once gave anchovies a chance, and now I still don't like them, but I had to make sure. Shulman's work had a degree of staging, or arranging the scene. He saw each building not only as a structure, but also as a space filled with life, and wanted to show lifestyle and the potential use of these spaces. And for this, he wasn't afraid of staging the scene and incorporating elements such as furniture or people. Sometimes he felt the natural landscape didn't do justice to the architecture, and he would thoughtfully add plants or trees to show a connection with nature. For example, in this picture you can see how he used tree branches and flowers to frame the house. And this is precisely how he did it. Now, I'm not suggesting you should start carrying branches with you everywhere, but you get the idea. Sometimes, to increase the interest and appeal of our subject and to add context to our scene, we can use elements in the foreground to frame our subject. I took this image in Colombia of these two love doves who proposed to each other moments before. How beautiful. In this example, I've somewhat staged the scene using these branches to frame our subject. In this case, this tree was right there, but I consciously took a few steps back to include this element in my frame. Is this considered a frame? In my opinion, yes, because frames don't have to be enclosed, and frames can be anything. For example, when I was in England and drinking a pint or two or three, I took this photo. And this drop from my cold, delicious pint served as a frame. In this image, I used this hand from an ad on the street to frame this woman. And in this final picture, also in Toledo, I used these canopies to frame the cathedral. And thanks to this frame, I'm also adding a narrative about the city and its surroundings. One of the main strengths of framing is the ability to heighten our subject's importance by isolating them from the rest of the scene. This way, we make sure the viewer's attention is drawn directly to where we want it. We are narrowing down our focus into the subject. Notice how our eyes are immediately drawn to the dog. There are a couple of reasons for this. 1, it's a dog. 2, I was lucky enough to capture the dog looking straight at the camera. That in itself is quite powerful. But it's the frame within the frame that really tells us the dog is the star of the show. Not seeing the owner's face plays a significant role too. And this was achieved through framing, by removing unwanted distractions from the scene. And that's it, not much more to say. Start using frames into your work and you'll notice a significant improvement. We'll be back with more elements and principles of photography soon. Until then, have fun exploring.